What happens when an unlikely friendship defies the laws of nature and survival? In the heart of a quiet, snow-blanketed valley, an old wooden cabin stood alone, battered by time and the harsh wilderness. Eleanor Green, a 63-year-old widow with silver hair and weathered hands, had chosen this secluded life after losing her husband and son. Her days were spent tending a modest farm, but beneath her quiet exterior was a heart aching for purpose. One fateful winter morning, Eleanor encountered something extraordinary. A magnificent elk with a shimmering silver coat standing at the edge of the forest as if waiting for her. It was the coldest winter in decades, the kind that silenced even the most resilient creatures of the wilderness. Eleanor's modest cabin sat at the edge of the forest, its chimney sending tendrils of smoke into the frosty air. Her routine was simple: gather firewood, feed her few remaining chickens, and watch the endless snow fall. But that morning was different. As she approached the tree line with her axe in hand, Eleanor froze. There, just beyond the nearest pine, stood a creature like none she had ever seen. A massive elk with a coat that shimmered like molten silver under the pale winter sun. Its antlers stretched high like the branches of an ancient tree, and its eyes, amber pools of intelligence and pain, locked onto hers. Eleanor didn't dare move. She had heard of rare animals in the mountains, but this was something out of a legend. The elk, too, seemed frozen, its breath visible in the cold air. Then, as if deciding she was no threat, it took a tentative step forward, lowering its head slightly. "You're not afraid of me, are you?" Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. The elk didn't retreat. Instead, it stood firm, its eyes never leaving hers. Eleanor noticed how thin it looked, its ribs visible beneath the shimmering coat. She felt a pang of sorrow. From that day forward, the elk, which she named Silver, became a part of her life. Eleanor would leave out scraps of hay and vegetables at the edge of the forest. Though Silver never approached the cabin, he would watch her from a distance, his shimmering presence a source of comfort she hadn't felt in years. Word of the silver elk began to spread. It started with a pair of hikers who had glimpsed him through the trees, their excitement spilling over in the local tavern. Soon, hunters armed with rifles and greed began to descend on the valley, their boots crunching through the snow as they scoured the woods for this mythical prize. Eleanor's peaceful life was shattered. Each gunshot in the distance made her heart race, each set of footprints near her cabin filled her with dread. One evening, as she chopped firewood, she noticed Silver watching her from his usual spot, but this time, his eyes were filled with unease, his ears twitching at every distant sound. "They're coming for you, aren't they?" Eleanor whispered, her voice breaking. She knew she had to act. Late into the night, she devised a plan to protect Silver. Using old ropes and scraps of cloth, she built crude decoys to place deeper in the woods, hoping to divert the hunters. She even scattered salt and hay trails away from the valley, creating false paths. Despite her efforts, the hunters drew closer. One bitterly cold morning, Eleanor found herself face to face with 3 men carrying rifles. "Ma'am," one of them said, his voice gruff but polite. "We've heard there's a rare elk in these parts. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Eleanor met his gaze, her hands steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I've lived here for years and never seen anything of the sort. You boys are chasing ghosts." The men exchanged glances but eventually turned away, their boots crunching through the snow. Eleanor watched them leave, her heart pounding. She knew it was only a matter of time before they returned. One night, the valley erupted with the sound of gunfire. Eleanor bolted out of bed, her heart hammering. Grabbing a lantern and her old shotgun, she ran into the forest, her breath forming clouds in the icy air. She found Silver cornered by a group of hunters near a frozen stream. The elk's eyes were wide with fear, his powerful legs trembling as the men aimed their rifles. "Stop!" Eleanor screamed, raising her shotgun. The hunters turned, startled by the sight of an old woman in her nightgown standing between them and their prize. "Lady, you're gonna get yourself killed," one of them snarled. "Maybe," Eleanor replied, her voice steady, "but you'll have to shoot me first." For a moment, the forest was silent, except for the sound of the stream trickling beneath the ice. Then, one by one, the hunters lowered their rifles, muttering curses as they retreated into the darkness. As the last man disappeared, Silver stepped forward, his massive frame trembling. Eleanor reached out a hand, and for the first time he allowed her to touch him. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're safe now." The encounter changed everything. Word spread that the valley was no longer a safe place for hunters thanks to the crazy old woman with a shotgun. Silver began to roam freely again, his shimmering coat blending with the snowy landscape. Eleanor, for the first time in years, felt a sense of purpose. She began documenting her days with Silver in a weathered journal, filling its pages with sketches and stories of their time together. As winter gave way to spring, Silver disappeared into the forest. Eleanor knew he would leave eventually, but it didn't lessen the ache in her heart. One warm summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eleanor heard a familiar sound. Stepping outside, she saw Silver standing at the edge of the forest. But he wasn't alone. By his side stood a smaller elk with the same shimmering coat, a testament to his survival and resilience. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes as she watched them disappear into the trees, knowing she had played a part in something much larger than herself.